I met a ski guide in the San Juans last week. My first read on him is that he was in his mid 50s. This guy was a lot smaller than me, very lean, svelte, weathered, and also slightly grumpy to meet us. He showed up at the guiding hut with flip flops on, and it was 30 degrees outside. He looked at the four of us, four people from Texas, late in the season, and you can tell that he wasn't fully convinced that we belonged there, which is totally fair. And once we started skinning, he was actually really hard to have a conversation with, really hard to read. He moved slowly up the track, methodical, never spazzy, and completely comfortable in terrain that was a little harder for the rest of us. At some point along the way, he mentioned that he had graduated from high school the year the Vietnam War ended. And I don't know if it was the altitude or just my bad math skills, but I couldn't compute what he was saying, because if the Vietnam War ended in 1975, then this guy in front of me wasn't 55, he was 70. And it turns out he was turning 70 the following month. Now, his resume came out in pieces over the next couple of days. Turns out he was a collegiate skier, he's a lifelong climber, and he said, very just off candor, that he had once held the speed record on El Cap for like 10 minutes. Still, he has spent decades as an arborist, and currently, at the young age of 69, he was heavily into rock climbing. He was doing cyclocross, and he was backcountry ski guiding. None of that information he had volunteered. I had to pull it out of him. None of that seemed like he was bragging. It was just the outline of a life that kept moving when everyone around him had slowed down. Now, when one of us in the group had complimented his fitness, which, God, was hard not to do, he would snap back that he really wasn't. He said that he had been doing this for a while, and I believed that it wasn't just modesty, but age, or this thing that we kept bringing up, just wasn't a variable that he seemed to care about or even track. Now, I couldn't help myself. At some point, I said, hey, when you wake up and things don't feel right, what do you do? And he looked at me like it was the dumbest question he'd ever heard. He said, well, I figure I was hurt or tired, and I try to deal with it the best I can. So the answer wasn't a protocol. It wasn't some book he was writing. It was just common sense from someone who planned to be outside tomorrow. Now, on the last day, I asked him about the longevity movement. Hey, what do you think about Peter Attia? You know, what about the marginal decade? And his response was, what the hell is longevity? And then he said, Peter Attia, is that the climber out of Tahoe? So I share a little story with you because I do want to connect it to this longevity movement. I think longevity and all of those that are immersed in that are asking real questions: root cause analysis, systems thinking, addressing actual drivers of decline. And so I want to be really clear that I don't think the science is the problem. I think the problem is the relationship to the body that it quietly produces. So when longevity becomes the goal, the body becomes a project. Training, recovery, nutrition, all of that becomes defensive. And so we start managing a liability that at some future point we can stop managing and start using. So the progression looks like first protect, then live. Now, most people who are serious about their physical lives have accepted this bargain without noticing that they've accepted it. And so the tracking and the protocols, what happens over time is that they shift from enabling engagement to replacing it. So think about this. You're not telling yourself that you're avoiding life. You're telling yourself that you're managing it very efficiently, which feels productive, which I think is actually the problem. These training sessions that we do, they become the point rather than the price of admission. The metrics become the experience. You stop asking yourself what full engagement looks like today, and you start asking questions like whether today's session is going like according to plan. This 7-year-old salty guide had what seemed like no plan. He also had no failure mode. So if you remember one thing, remember this. I'm convinced that bodies adapt in response to use, not in preparation for use. He was operating for what was available rather than what was ideal. Most people are asking, what do I need to protect so I can perform my best? He was asking something entirely different. He was asking, what do I have today and how do I use it? Seemed like he never separated his physical life from his actual life. They were the same thing. He never set a goal. He never set a goal to be a guide at 70. Think about that. The capability he had was a byproduct of a life that he just refused to stop living. Now, I've thought of my own longevity enthusiasm a lot since that trip. I think the fear that's driving me is not the fear of death. It's a cascade. I'm afraid that my capability will decline and that pain will make the things that I love inaccessible. That desire will follow this capability spiraling downward, and that I'll become a version of myself cut off from the experiences that I think actually define me. So the dread isn't mortality, it's a identity collapse. And I wonder if you can relate to that. So if that's just me, that would be one thing. But if you can't relate to that, then I think that longevity medicine solves for duration. But what most of us actually care about is staying connected to the doing. And those aren't the same problem. My guide was connected to the doing completely. His body, without any apparent intention, became the proof. So what does this mean practically? Stay in contact with the actual doing, not the metrics around it. Pay attention every morning to what you have, not what the plan says you should have. Absolutely address what breaks, fix what's in front of you, and then just go. Never let the skill become the point. And that's great advice for me and hopefully for you. I think the skill is the price of admission, and absolutely it's responsible that we pay it, but then we need to go do the thing that we paid it for. So every morning, the question is the same. It's not, am I on track? But, hey, given what I have today, what does full participation look like? Now, is a cute example using this guide, and it was inspirational and aspirational to me, but I want to be direct. Not everyone who keeps going is going to get that outcome. For this guy, he probably had decades of outdoor work, loading a body in a way that, man, a gym never could. We could probably assume that he had no catastrophic injury across 50 years of pretty high consequence activity. And, you know, that last part is as much about luck as it is about discipline. So this anecdote, the sample size is 1, and I'm aware of that. But I think the argument still holds, because the alternative isn't do what he did. It's Stop organizing your physical life around a future self that you're trying to protect and start using the one you have. That future self is, well, it's a different person anyway. So he didn't beat the longevity people by having a better system. He beat them by never needing one. The gap between the person doing the thing and the person preparing to do the thing doesn't close with more preparation. It closes when you decided that you prepared enough and you go. The ones who spent those years managing and protecting and waiting to start living got something too. It just wasn't what they were waiting for.